There we go. I'm all set now. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year. I hope we're all doing well. I hope you have a nice warm beverage and you are joining me all snuggled up because it is cold here in the UK. I'm currently filming this on the week where it's pretty much minus temperatures throughout the whole week. How are we all? Do we all have a good end to 2023? I am slightly scared that we are in 2024, but I'm also feeling really inspired. I kind of had a little look at my goals for this year and I'm kind of going about my days differently, planning things differently. If you want to know how I'm doing that, or just generally how I'm changing for the new year, then I will do a video on that. Just kind of looking at different things in my life. Oh, I don't think I should leave my glasses there because the dog is going to sit on those. I find it really good reflecting on the previous year and going through certain points and seeing how I can change things for the coming year. And I do like how I'm trying to achieve my goals at the moment. So anyway, that's another thing. Today, we're talking about books. We're talking about my favourite books of the last year. I thought this would be a good way to ease into filming stuff for the new year. I know we're a couple of weeks into Jan, but you know, things have been a bit crazy. I started a new job, you know, just been planning classes for going back to teaching. And now I'm kind of in week 2 of teaching, so we're kind of in that point now. Yeah, kind of in that point. If I just keep looking over here, by the way, I am filming this in front of a massive window which looks out onto the street. I'm just watching everyone who walks past look at me like, what are you doing? Yeah, so I thought this would be a good video to start off with the new year. Especially, as I said last year, I wanted to do more book content, which I did do, so that was a goal achieved. But I want to do more. I aimed for 30 books and I read 34 books, I think, last year. So I thought I would reflect on those and then kind of go through my goals for this coming year reading wise, because there's a couple that I do want to try and get ticked off. So without further ado, grab your coffee, your tea, your hot chocolate, your wine, whatever you've got. Get under a blanket and let's talk books. I'm also waiting for the point where the dog comes and goes, "You're sat in my chair," because this is his chair. But this is also a great reading chair, as I found out last year, so I am claiming it. I also quite like filming in this setup, it's quite cool. So my first favourite of the year for 2023 was actually the first book I read, which is quite something. I feel like that's a good start to the year if you start with a really good book. So the first book that I read, which was a favourite, was a book called The Eye of the Beholder by Margie Orford, and this was one that was part of the Canongate read along. So it's like a monthly thing, it's like a book club sort of thing, where we get sent a book and we read it. We read a certain number of chapters a week, and then at the end, yeah, we kind of review it and we talk it through. It's all through their Instagram, so anyone can really take part. But they obviously very kindly send me the books to read, which is very nice. And it's such a great way of discovering new authors. Obviously they're all authors that are published by Canongate, but it's a great way to kind of discover new authors. And I've discovered so many fab authors through their read-alongs. So yeah, so this was one of the first ones, and this is basically about following the lives of 3 women. Oh, that's gonna fall off my knee. It's all kind of set in like winter, icy conditions. Part of it's set in Scotland for a bit. A small part of it is set in London, and then the other half I think is set in Canada. So it's all very kind of wintry vibes. It was perfect for a January read, a wintry read which wasn't Christmassy. And it's a thriller-esque type. And it follows, yeah, these 3 women and basically how their lives intertwine. 2 of the women are related. They are daughter and mother. But the third woman is completely unrelated to them. And it's so interesting how they end up kind of meeting. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's just really well put together. What else did I say about it? It kind of delves into the art world a little bit, which was really interesting, and also about, again, how just treatment of women. All 3 of these women are very strong women, which is nice. One of them is kind of coming into her strength, which is the daughter, and the other 2 are very strong independent women in their own way, but still how men can affect them and affect that strength. I also love the fact that all the characters were flawed. I love flawed characters. Not flawed as in I hate them, like they're really irritating, but flawed as in, because everyone has flaws, and as an actor I find that really interesting, like looking at a character's flaws and why they do these things, because that's essentially what we are as humans. We're all flawed, no one's perfect. And I just find it really interesting when that is portrayed in literature. I just realised I got a really weird hair. Look at this piece of hair. That little ringlet, which is doing strange things. That's a bit better. Okay, the next book, which was a favourite, was Queenie. And now this was one of my first audiobooks of the year. I really got into audiobooks in 2023. That was one of the things that I loved, because previously I dabbled in audiobooks, but I'd never really properly committed to them and committed to listening to them. And Queenie was the first one where I really took on board what was going on, and I just loved it. I thought it was great. I loved the character. I loved the portrayal of Queenie. I listened to, who was the person who read it? It was Tamara Lawrence, who is amazing. I think she's awesome. And I just loved, again, a modern, flawed woman going through all sorts of things like breakups, casual sex, systematic racism, all sorts of things going on. And I just thought her journey was really inspiring, and I just was rooting for her all the way through, even though she was a flawed character. Yeah, and I just thought, I just felt, she felt very real. I could really see her, if that makes sense. I thought that the writing really brought her to life. So yes, and I think the Tamara Lawrence one is on, I will listen to it on BBC Sounds. So if you want to listen to the same one, I don't know if that's the only one, but that's the one I listened to and I thought it was great. So the next book is The Gift of Rain by Tan Twang Eng. Oh my gosh, I just love their writing. I just fell in love the first time I read it. So the first book I ever read by them were, I think it's called The Gardens of the Evening Mist. I think that's the name of it. And a lot of their books are set in Malaysia, and Malaysia is a very special place to my heart because I went backpacking around Malaysia, and they just bring it to life so well. And there are so many different parts that they mainly kind of do a lot of stuff around Penang in Georgetown, which was one of my favourite places in Malaysia. And the way that they write about it and the people, it just brought back so many memories. So I think I'm a little bit biased because obviously I've been to Malaysia and I'm experiencing it, but I think still their writing style is amazing, that it brings it to life even if you don't have an emotional connection to that place. I just love their writing. So I read The Gift of Rain. This was one of the books I read in 2023, and it's set during the war. It's about a boy who meets a Japanese man who ends up being his kind of master in training in martial arts, and how their relationship grows with the backdrop of war, because Japan invaded Malaysia during the war, and all of the stuff that goes with that. It is heartbreaking. I cried a few times, and I don't always cry with books. I'm more like a visual person. If I'm watching a film or a TV show and something's going on there, you bet your bottom dollar I am bawling my eyes out. But with books, if it really gets to me, like if the writing is amazing, like that good, and it only happens with a couple of books, and this was one of the books. Sorry, the dog is scratching the carpet. Bertie! We're good. Okay, what was next? Oh, next is a non-fiction book. So this was one which I'd never heard of before, and it was part of the read-along. And it's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And Rubin is I don't know if he still is, but he was a music producer. And it's basically about bringing creativity into your life on a daily basis. And I just thought it was great. There were so many little nuggets. The way it's written is kind of similar in the fact that it's like short form, chapters, a bit like what Matt Haig does with his non-fiction books, and I really enjoyed that because I like that when Matt Haig does it. But there were so many little nuggets. In a way, I almost wish I hadn't read it in one go, if you see what I mean. I wish I kind of gone back to it slowly and read it slower rather than reading as part of the read along, because I feel like I could read it again and again and again and pick up new bits of little nuggets of wisdom as I do that. Yeah, and I just think it was just, yeah, there were just so many different things that I hadn't thought of, and I'm a creative person, so I'm always about trying to bring creativity into your life. So anyway, so that's for any creative people out there, but not just like actors, it could be any creative outlet or subject. Okay, the next book is from a series which I really, really love, and it is The Bullet That Missed, which is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. It's just fab. I just love these books, and they just seem to get better and better with each book. This one wasn't perfection, I will be honest with you. There were definitely some things that I found were wrapped up a little bit too well for my liking. I kind of missed that because I feel like the second book had nailed that, as in the story was completed, but there were a couple of things which I felt like were more realistic in the way that they had gone about ending, if that makes sense. Whereas I think it was a bit too neat. It was a little bit too... In the UK we have a programme called Father Brown, and it was a little bit like that, but a little even more neat than Father Brown. Do you know what I mean? I still loved it though. I still thought it was great. I loved the characters. The characters are just so believable and funny, and so they're almost like four people who are real, and I'm like kind of watching what's going on with their lives, and I enjoy every minute of their time on the page. I absolutely love them. I didn't guess the murderer, so that was quite good, because I did guess a couple of people involved, but I still was surprised, which I love it when I'm surprised by something and I don't guess who did it straight away. But yeah, just brilliant, another great book. We do have the next one, which I do need to read. Next, this is amazing. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 5-star reads in a row during the first half of the year. That's quite interesting. They weren't all favourites, I would say. I read Looking for Alaska. That was a 5-star read, but I don't think it was necessarily a favourite, so I will skip that. I did, however, listen to The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. I think it's how you say that name. Again, another heartbreaking book, which just broke me. And again, very well done in the audiobook. It's basically about 2 refugees' journey from Syria to the UK and all the things that happened to them along that journey. I'm currently listening to, I've nearly finished it actually, American Dirt, which is a similar sort of thing in the fact that they're travelling from Mexico to the US. And I just find any story like that just so gripping and heartbreaking. And this was one of them. I just felt like you could really feel the pain of the 2 characters in this through the storytelling and the flashbacks, and yeah, just beautiful. Just a really beautiful book. So I started my journey into the ACOTAR world. I read the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. Oh, it's just... My friend's husband described these books really well. It's basically fairy smut, but oh my god, is it so good. It's one of those ones where you just enjoy the journey so much. It's fun. Yes, there's lots of things. I think this one is fairly tame, I think, compared to the other books, a lot of people have said. It's just lots of fun. The world building is great. The characters are great. You go through so many emotions along with the characters, especially in the second half of this book. It's YA, but in a good way. The next book is by one of my other favourite authors, which is Jess Kidd. I read The Night Ship, and as per usual, this was actually a 4.5 star for me. but I still loved it. I still absolutely loved it. Jess Kidd just has this way of writing, and you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen in the end. But she just does such a good way of taking you on the journey and you hoping that it turns out differently, even though you know it's not. And I think that's to do with her characters, and they just really grip your heart and you really care about them. And I think that's the thing. I knew how this book was going to end, and I was totally fine with that. It still broke my heart. It still did it. It still took me through the chaos and all the emotions of her writing. And I think that's such a skill, and I don't think I've ever come across it with any other writer before. Obviously, you know, you just don't, there might be other writers that do that, but at the moment, Jess Kidd is the only author, and the first author, who has made me do that, and I love it. Even though the ending is predictable, I still love it. The two main characters in this are children, and they're supposed to be about 9 years old. Now, I teach 9-year-olds, so I know kind of the varieties of immature 9-year-olds to mature 9-year-olds. But these two children seemed much older than 9. They seemed at least young teenage years. And I think that was a slight issue for me, because I lost that innocence. They still were innocent, but I felt like the way they spoke, regardless of the time zones these are set in, because basically it follows the lives of two children. One in, I think is it modern day or the 80s? One child is set in 1989, I was right, in the 80s, so 1989. And then the other child, their timeline is in the 1600s. So regardless of the time zone, I still felt they were quite old, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like she really grasped the way that a child's mind works and how that comes across on the page. But apart from that, I loved it, and it was still a fab book, and I do highly recommend her books anyway. Oh, let's go for this one. So I read my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I read Daisy Jones and the Six. I've never read a book like it. It's all in interview format, and again, just completely flawed characters who are just awesome. And I just was so excited to see where their journeys, where they ended up, and I loved the journey that it went through. And I found that the interview style was a really interesting take on that. Again, I've never really kind of seen that before in fiction, so I thought that was a really interesting take. Obviously the fact that it was set in the 1970s, I'm a sucker for anything vintage, so I loved the setting, the fashion, the music, everything like that. I also loved that love-hate relationship between Daisy and Billy. I just thought their chemistry was quite something. And again, like, I didn't expect the way that their journey went to end up the way it did, so, which was quite something. Loads of little twists and turns as well in it. Just thought it was great. Just thought it was a really, really good book. And to be honest, I don't think I've met anyone who has said anything bad about it. So that's quite something. I've got two, well, that was a 5-star, and then I've got two more 5-star ones, which were again back to back. So the next one, and these were all favourites, by the way. The next one is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. Again, I just read a lot of heartbreaking books in 2023. I just really enjoyed that emotional read. I actually wrote here, I said I physically ached at certain points for these characters, and that's the only way I can describe it. I just was so invested with these characters. It's very character based, this book, and it follows Shuggie, who is a young boy in he's from Scotland, and the way he kind of grows up, he's discovering himself, his upbringing, his family. There's so many kind of things that are put into this melting pot of his upbringing and his childhood, and yeah, it was just quite hard to. I listened to an audiobook, and I recommend the audiobook as well. Yeah, just really, some of it was a little bit hard to listen to, but still beautiful. I still really loved it. And I was just hooked. I just was really hooked on everything that happened to Shuggy and his family. And then the next one was a Matt Haig book. Again, another favourite author of mine. This was a 4.5 stars, but again, I still think this was a favourite book of mine. So if you know my reading habit, let's just put my cup down. I'm not overly into sci-fi. I don't know why. I just found I've never really kind of got into it at all. And this is technically a sci-fi book. And I really enjoyed it. I thought this was so... I think it's because I'm not very sciencey, and I think that when it goes into a lot of scientific jargon, I don't really gel with it. I found that with The Martian, I DNF'd that. But I also found that the character was quite arrogant and I just did not like him. So I find that when it's a science fiction book, I don't like it to be very sciencey, which kind of goes against that. But this was fab. You know, I'm not surprised, it's Matt Haig. It took a while to get into, because basically this is about an alien who comes to Earth and he's been given a mission, and he kind of ends up taking over the body of a human who they've abducted. And because he's new to Earth, it takes him a while to get used to Earth, obviously. But it also takes us a while to get used to him, and that is probably very clever in the fact that it's reflecting that in the writing. But I could see why some people might not like that. There were some really funny moments, you got used to him, you ended up loving him, and the thing that he's fighting for, because he ends up kind of going off of his mission a little bit. He's able to find really beautiful and poignant moments in sadness. I also said I do want to try and reread this at some point. Now I know how the story is shaped, because I do feel like Haig is so good at putting little hidden messages and things in his stories, and I feel like in a book like this I will want to revisit those. Next book, again, another book that made me cry, that was not a 5-star read, but I loved it, and that is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Cloon. Oh my god, this is another book I actually physically cried at. The ending just got me, and I knew it was coming, and it just got me anyway. Yeah, the characters are amazing, well-rounded, flawed, lovable. There was a lot of joy and comfort which this brought me, and then the ending just ripped me apart. The only thing I found with this book is it's not a YA. However, Wallace and Hugo, the way that they talk to each other was very YA. And I couldn't quite grasp that, especially because Wallace, I think, is about in his 40s and Hugo is in his 30s, and it didn't quite work with the fact that they were speaking like teenagers. Okay, another book which I loved was one, I'm sorry, I have a lot, this video is going to be long. I think you've realised this now if you've made it this far. But I did have a lot of favourites. It was a good year for reading. The next book I read, and I'm really going to butcher this name, and I kind of almost don't want to say it because I'm really worried about butchering it, because there's a lot of accents on the way that their name is spelled. So I read Stay With Me by Ayubami Adebayo. I really hope I said that right, because she is one of my new favourite authors that I discovered in 2023. This was another read-along one, and it's about a woman who is trying to get pregnant in Nigeria. Getting pregnant, especially during when she was trying to get pregnant in the 80s, is quite an important thing, and the struggles of her getting pregnant is huge, and the psychological trauma she goes through. Oh, it broke me. Like and the writing flowed so well, and I just got sucked in. So even when I put the book down, I knew I would pick it back up and I'd be straight back in. I didn't have to think, oh, what's just gone on here? Or, you know, what was going on? I was in there and I was invested so much in these characters. Again, heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. I was rooting for, again, I'm really sorry if I said this name wrong, Yejidi? I think. I don't know, I'm really sorry, I'm rubbish at names. And there are so many twists and turns. There were sometimes I was like gasping because I did not expect those twists and turns. They just came out of nowhere. I feel like if I wasn't reading this with the read along, where I had to read a certain number of chapters a week, I would totally have binged this quite easily. And I found it really fascinating discovering all the cultural and historical references that was going on, because this flitted between 1980s Nigeria and present day Nigeria. Yeah, and I think it's great. And I am reading my second book by her, which is called A Spell of Good Things, and again I'm really enjoying it so far. Next book, which was a favourite, was The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. Oh, I love this book so much, to the point where I listened to this as an audiobook, and I really want to get the physical book because I feel like I want to annotate it, and I'm not an annotator. I'm really not an annotator, but I feel like I want to annotate this book. I love it. It's set in I think it's Victorian Depression era, a little bit later than I thought. My apologies. So it's Depression era America. It's set in a small town. An English woman moves there after marrying an American, and how she's settling into the community. And then what happens is a library is set up in the town, and she decides to join the library and work there as a librarian. And it's a story about friendship. It's a story about women fighting for equality. It's about the love of reading. There is a shift and a twist about halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, you know, where one of the characters is in real jeopardy, and the writing is just fab. It's just really good. Obviously Jojo Moyes wrote Me Before You. I don't remember, I loved Me Before You, but this is the whole other level of writing, and I can't quite put my finger on it. The accent on the audiobook, the person who's reading it did slip every so often, but that's my only complaint, and it's nothing to do with the book, it's to do with the audiobook, so that was no reflection on that. The next book that I really enjoyed was The Island Child by Molly Atkin. This was one that surprised me. This ended up being a 5-star read, and I did not expect it to be a 5-star read. The whole way through I was like, this is a maybe 3.5. I think it's because you have to work at this. You have to work at this story. It's not an easy read, but the story is so worth it when you actually end up getting into the swing of it. Yeah, I've written here, during her childhood, the writing and the speech is chaotic, almost showing how unsettled she is, and then when she leaves the island it settles down. And again, going back to like what I was saying about Matt Haig, it was a similar sort of thing. It was almost like the reading experience reflected the character's experience. And the only thing that didn't feel right with me was like one of the big reveals was really casually thrown in without any warning. There probably were tiny clues about it, but I think I'd have to read it again. I think this is probably a reread for me. But it was a reading experience which I didn't expect to love and then ended up loving. So that's the reason why I loved that one. And that was it. That was my favourite. I thought I had more. I mean, that was quite a lot. But yeah, those were my favourite books. I've lost count. I don't know how many favourite books I had. But there you go. Those are my favourite books. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you had any favourite books of 2023. And, oh, and before I go, my plans for this year, for 2024, I want to read 35 books, which I think I'll do because I read 34 last year. And I'm reading a few smaller books this year because my next goal is I really want to finish A Series of Unfortunate Events series. It's a series I loved as a child. I had the full lovely like set of them, but I never finished it. And I want to reread it this year. So I've already read 2 of the books. I've read The Bad Beginning and The Reptile Room, number 1 and number 2, which are books I have read. I can't remember where I read up to. I think I got about halfway through, but I wanted to, you know, have the whole reading experience of reading it this year. So there are 13 books in the series, and I think I'll be able to do it. I think I'll be able to finish it. And I also want to, I've created myself a TBR jar. I have a lot of books and I know I need to read them. It's that classic cliche, I buy books more than I read them. So I want to read more of my owned books this year. I have bought a few in some of the sales. I bought some in the Waterstone sale, and I bought some in the HarperCollins sale that they had at the beginning of this week. But apart from that, I want to try and read the books that I own rather than buying more books, which is going to be easier said than done, but I'm going to try. And I'm going to do that by using a TBR jar. So I will let you know how I get on with that. So yeah, I hope you're all well. I hope your start to 2023 has... 2023? We're not in 2023 anymore. 2024 has been good. And let me know if there are any specific book videos you want to see. And I will see you in my next video. Mwah. Bye.